Hello, my name is Michael Emma, and I'm going to be showing you my NPC and its tool. So to start off, we have a lion, and its tool is a bird cage. Now what the bird cage is able to do is have these three birds move around a set location inside, and they'll generate an audio source volume, basically, which can be found right here. The volume setting will increase as long as anything with the tag player is within its trigger, which can be represented by this sphere. When that happens, it'll increase by 0.1 every second, as you can see in this previous test I had. And when that happens, the line will be able to detect it. So currently, I don't have any animations ready for the line, but we can pretend it's sleeping right now. So what'll happen is the line will detect that number, and when it gets to the maximum volume, which is 1, it'll wake up and deactivate this sphere trigger. It'll deactivate its own script and activate another one of its own scripts that allow it to move around its cage, the same way the birds move around their cage. So I made one universal script and 2 scripts that are limited to my own task. So if you want to see it in action, I'll show you right now, and then I'll go over the code. So to start off, I'll switch right back to the CMU because it's easier to see. I don't know how Professor Kavon is going to use the camera, but right now what I have set up is not practical. So in runtime, if I move the fake player with the tag player right here, and I bring it closer, you'll see in the console the volume is increasing, and we can even double check that right here. It was just set to 0. So now what you'll notice is the line is going to start moving around. The one issue with this script is that it'll set a new rotation and its velocity will increase in that direction. So until he randomly rotates in the complete opposite direction of where he's facing, you won't see him move around that much. He'll just kind of be bumping into walls at this point. But, you know, pretend he's looking at the player once in a while. But that's pretty much how that works. And that's all I have to show for that. So onto the scripts. The first one I made was called Object Mover, and the way this works is we have a rigid body for the object it's attached to, a float which will be randomized over time, a wait time which will determine how long until it stops and finds a new rotation to rotate to, the speed at which the velocity will be set by the rigid body later on, whether it's ready to rotate, and if it's currently moving or not. So on the start, we'll find the rigid body, and we'll begin the first coroutine, which is wait for time. So going down here, it'll wait a random number in seconds, so that way each bird and eventually the line will not find a new rotation on the same exact frame every time. They'll have a slight variation to each other. And then we'll make ready true. So then if ready is true, going back up to the update, it'll start this go direction method, and is ready will become false right away. So go direction will find a new rotation right here from a range of 0 to 360, and it'll use the transform Euler angles to give it a new rotation with the same x and z, but the y is going to be the new random number between 0 and 360. Start moving will become true, and start coroutine will basically start the coroutine wait for time, which is an I enumerator right here. So it'll wait a certain amount of time, then it'll set its velocity back down to 0, and start moving will become false again. And then is ready will become true again, which will set it back up to the update. Now, what start moving does is we'll go to the update and set its velocity to transform.forward times the speed, and the speed was 1. So for the birds being really small compared to like a standard capsule collider and capsule mesh, they will more or less bump into the walls immediately, and almost look as if they're flying around and landing somewhere on the cage. But for the lion, it's a little more awkward because of its size and its unnatural movement. But for now, that's all I've got. Next is the cage trigger, which is basically controlling the cage itself and how the volume works and the time. So this one's a little more complicated. We have a float volume, which will determine later on the actual volume of the audio source component of the birdcage. We have a wait time, which works exactly the same way as it did in Object Mover. We have a wait again, which will determine when the next coroutine will start, and I'll show that off. And we have a do one and do two boolean, which will determine if we'll increase the number or decrease the number. And that actually reminds me, one thing I forgot to mention is if the player was to move away from the trigger, the volume would go back down. And I did that to replicate how a bird might squawk at a person walking by, but stop when there's no one around. So I feel like I'm running out of time, so I'll start going through this a bit quicker. We'll have the collider here. That'll know its trigger. And the audio source, set those in the start. And set the volume equal to volume. The audio source is volume to volume, which is currently 0. We have late update, which if wait again is true and do one is equal to true, we'll start the first kind of coroutine, which increases the number. And then if do 2 is true and wait again is true, we'll start the second coroutine, which decreases the volume. So on trigger enter, do 1 is true, do 2 is like guaranteed false, and wait again is true. So if wait again, do 1's true, start the coroutine. And down here, I'll show you this. It'll make another check right here. So wait again becomes false. It'll do the check. And that way, when wait again is false, it won't call the coroutine every frame over and over again. So it'll wait the wait time when I think I set it to 5 seconds in the inspector, but over here I think it says 1 second. It'll increase the volume by the number, which is that I inputted in. The audio volume will increase by that number, and it'll clamp it between 0 and 1 because it's a float. It'll debug.log it, and the volume will basically make a check. So if it's equal to 1, it'll end this coroutine on its own. So it can never go back into this until the player leaves and comes back into the trigger. It'll wait again. It goes to true, which will bring us back up to the update, the late update, and it'll start doing this one again. However, if we were on trigger exit, the opposite would happen. Do 1 would become false, which makes that update impossible, but do 2 becomes true, which makes the second version possible, where we decrease the number. And both enumerators work almost exactly the same way. It's just that the code is reversed here, so do 2 is true and do 1 is false, and the needed change, we just input a negative number back up here instead of a positive number like we did in the first one. And that's pretty much this code, except for these two setters and getter type methods. So this method, get audio volume, is used by the lion to get the audio's volume, and deactivate trigger is used by the lion to deactivate this sphere collider that I talked about before, which we saw here. So the line manager is really simple. It just knows about the bird cage, and it has its own float for the audio volume. On the start, it gets the it finds the one object with the name birdcage _Michael _Emma, and it'll, in the update, it'll say the float audio volume is equal to the bird cage's audio volume, you know, the volume. And if the audio volume becomes 1, it'll wake itself up. When it wakes up, it'll deactivate the trigger. It will also make its volume 0, so the sound goes off. And it'll say woke up pissed off to show off how I say the word off a lot. And debug.log birdcage get component, and it'll debug.log that volume to make sure it's 0, which is how I tested it before. And then it'll enable the movement script and disable this script right here that we're seeing here. That way it can never happen again with that one line. that's pretty much how this game works. That's all I have to show for that. I could go through one more test just to show it off. And when it loads, I could hit back into the scene view. So if I move this closer, I could show off that other function now. If I take it away, the number here decreases again. And it'll work both ways. I could let it go all the way to 0.9 if I had to. Let it decrease some more, increase some more. And this was really the only way I was able to make it dynamic with this sort of setup. So then, yeah, the lion wakes up pissed off, sets it to 0. The player can't affect this anymore. The lion starts to walk around because now he's woken up. That's pretty much how this works. I guess that's it. My name is Michael Emma, and I hope this NPC is satisfactory to the project. And I'll catch y'all later.